Hey guys, happy Tuesday. We're here, another week of Ecclesiastes, and Seno is not here.
That's right. You've got me instead today.
Yes.
My apologies.
So Seno is away, but kind of not away. He's going to pop on later for question time, so don't worry, we're not going to be answering your questions tonight. So don't forget, if you have questions, please put them in the comments, use the hashtag question time, get tagging your friends, inviting them along to the night to hear another chapter of Ecclesiastes, which Seno will give us a talk from as well. But yes, you are not Seno. You have a flanny on, and so I feel like that's quite representative of Seno.
I was trying to still bring his essence to the stage. So
yeah, now you just need to maybe burp or something, or, you know, pick on me.
Shut up, Caitlin.
I wasn't ready for that. Okay, that's too real. I feel like Seno's right here with me. Okay, that wasn't planned, guys, at all. Okay, so we're going to get to know you a little bit, right? Now, you have actually been on the show before.
Yeah, once. Long time ago.
Yeah, long time ago. It was over Zoom. It was with Emily, your wife, and Ezra wasn't there. Ezra was asleep in the background somewhere.
Yes, thankfully. He was, yes.
And we got to hear a little bit about how you're actually, you're a teacher at the moment. You've been teaching here in Bathurst for about 2 years now.
Yeah.
And you're actually finishing up teaching because you're going to come to Bathurst University next year as a ministry apprentice. So you're going to kind of take over me. I'm going to go and you're going to kind of step in now.
Yes, I don't think I'll replace you. But,
no, I don't think you could.
No, I don't. I don't think I could either. But that's okay. It's okay. I'll fit in somewhere else.
Yes. But with that, next year is obviously going to be a bit different. You're going to hang out with Bathurst Christian Group, who actually, you know, you were a part of as a student for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you, what are you looking forward to next year coming on board?
There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to. Just getting started is going to be awesome. I can't wait to get to know all you guys. I think I've met most of you, but I don't know if I've met everyone though, because I only see what's on the Tuesday Night Lives when I watch it every now and then. But I'm really excited to get to know everyone and be able to see who you are, where you're at, and talk to you about Jesus. I'm really excited to be doing that as part of my job. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I can't wait for that. Yeah.
What about perhaps things that you're nervous for or that you're a little bit, I don't know, unsure about because you don't actually know what's going to be coming next year? I mean, obviously with this year we've had COVID and we could have never planned for that.
Yep.
What are things that you're nervous or unsure about?
The most immediate, obvious thing for me is being here. When I was doing BCS, we did not have Tuesday Night Live. I don't think we would have even known what to do, to be honest. And so just having a different setup, things working a bit differently. I think, you know, there'd been other MTS people, apprentices who had come in and I'd kind of seen them, and so that gave me an idea of what I would be doing. But this year, it's like it's been flipped on its head. So next year, I know the foundational ideas of what I'll be doing, but what that'll look like practically, I'll have to see. So a bit scared about that, but ready to go.
You're ready for it. You're ready for the change of whatever comes your way.
That's right.
Which is really good. Now, Ryan, on Tuesday Night Live, we have some really great questions that come out from all of our viewers there. I want to open up the floor as well for if anyone has any questions, plus these ones, so that we can, you know, really get to know more about you. One question has already come through, and it's from Lockie Batley, and he wants to know, sir, where did you get your pants from?
My pants?
Jeans. Or jeans. I mean, they're the same thing.
From the shops.
Interesting.
If I had to guess, just jeans.
Okay.
But I'm not going to check live.
There you go. Yeah. I'm glad that you're not going to either. But there you go. That's what the people want to know. But they also want to know, Ryan, what is your favourite apple?
My favourite apple?
Yeah, and don't get this answer wrong because it will start a fight.
Is there any other than a pink lady? Is there any other answer?
Yes, there definitely is.
You know, growing up, I used to only eat Granny Smiths.
Okay. What changed?
I was introduced to a pink lady.
Wow, and you just dropped the green apple so quickly.
I dropped that granny real hard.
Wow, that's really rude. I'm sure it hurt. Okay, another question though. You know, obviously, yeah, pink ladies are second tier. I agree, Stanley. But what about dried fruit? What is your favourite dried fruit?
None of them. I don't know.
What about sultanas?
Is this seriously the questions
this
you guys have?
This is what we want to know, Ryan. If you're coming on Tuesday Night Live and you're ready to be part of this group, then we need to know.
Look, if people put dried fruit in front of me, I'll probably just politely decline.
Ooh, rough.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So no dried fruit for you, but pink ladies chucked at you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very important one, which, you know, everyone is very split on. Where do you keep your chocolate, Ryan? Do you keep it in the cupboard or do you keep it in the fridge?
You know what? I think I do both, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think it depends. I think in summer it stays in the fridge, but in winter it's in the pantry.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't like melted chocolate when I don't want melted chocolate.
Fair enough. You're sitting very much on the fence there, Ryan, and sometimes you just need to take a leap either side.
Well,
What's your instinct?
My pink lady wasn't divisive enough for me.
No, it wasn't.
That's my instinct. My fridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fridge. There you go. Yeah. Interesting.
If I don't want it cold, I'll just let it melt in my mouth, and then I'll get it to where I want.
I mean, that's fair. I think a lot of people do that. That's supposed to help you eat, you know, slower. It's to really savour your food.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some more serious questions. People might have some more questions for you that we'll see coming up. But Ryan, what we've been looking at in Ecclesiastes and what constantly we've been brought to at the end of each week is that there are truths about the lessons that we're learning that the teacher brings up. And he's bringing up about life under the sun. And he raises these questions for us that really push us beyond the sun. And it pushes us to look beyond the sun so that we can see God. And I want to know, in your life, obviously you're a Christian, and you're pursuing to tell other people about God and about Jesus. And so you take it quite seriously. And I'd like to know a bit about perhaps what truth was it, or what kind of pushed you to look beyond the sun, to find God and to see the truth that Jesus brings?
Yeah, I think, growing up, I grew up in a Christian family, and so these ideas were always in me, and I think I grew up assuming they were true. But I think some things happened in my life that pushed me to really start asking those questions about the reality of truth in general. And I think in a lot of ways, I don't really know why I decided in those moments. There's a lot of moments in my life where I think back and I go, man, I don't know why I chose to stick with God in that moment, but all I know is that I did. But upon reflection, I can totally tell you why, right? And because it is true. Ecclesiastes is great for this, isn't it? It totally destroys all pseudo meaning that we can find under the sun here on earth, and pushes us to something bigger than us or ourselves. And I think I found that in God, and I specifically found that in Jesus, in the truth that he brings, that he is the way, the truth, and the life, isn't he? And just clinging on to that, and that making so much sense to me. I think that's where it's where I find all of my meaning.
Yeah. And so do you find that perhaps it was actually, like, now looking back in hindsight, those reasons that you were trusting and you kind of didn't really know why, you can kind of see what the teacher was getting at, and perhaps that's what was going on in your heart. You were asking these questions without really realising that you were pushing for something more. Yeah,
but perhaps I was probably just too young to have such wise and out there thoughts. I was probably just living in that moment. But yeah, if you were to ask me right here and right now, that would definitely be the answer I'd give.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful, and it's nice to kind of see, I guess, obviously how you've grown in wisdom, but also that confirmation of looking beyond the sun. We've got another important question from one of our viewers: is which Shrek movie is the best? I didn't see who it was from. I think it was Michael.
Shrek movie.
Yep, Shrek movie. 1, 2, or 3. Is there more?
There's a fourth one.
Oh, okay.
Which is the second best after
Okay.
after the first. It definitely goes Shrek 1, 4, 2, 3.
Wow. Okay.
Without a doubt in my mind.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if other people agree with you. Maybe Matt reckons Shrek 2.
Yeah, nah.
Okay, very interesting. I didn't know there was a fourth one, so there you go. Okay, now tonight, obviously we're moving through another stage of Ecclesiastes, and we're actually coming up to a kind of a last observation. So obviously we've been going through and we've been looking at all these different questions that is being raised, and we've been looking through it, and we're kind of coming up towards our end of Ecclesiastes. We only have 3 weeks left after this. And so we're kind of really starting to answer the question now and seeing where the teacher is driving to. And tonight we're going to dig into it a lot more. We're reading through Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and it's going to raise up this idea about how do we embrace life. And so, question for you, Ryan, how do you embrace life?
How do I embrace
Yeah, how do you embrace life?
Well, it has to be, again, it comes back to where I find my meaning, right? And I embrace life by doing what I can to live out the life or the purpose in which I was given. And from my perspective, that is to live solely and fully for God in everything I do, and to love Him and to love others as I do that. And that's why I get out of bed in the morning.
So you would say it's kind of embracing life. You need to understand who you are.
Yeah.
You need to understand what you're here to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. It's an interesting way to look at it, I guess, because then, yeah, as you said, you wake up every day and you're going to kind of then live out your day, taking hold of that day because of what you know. So that'll be really interesting, I think, for us to think about. And obviously, Senna is going to help us through this chapter. And perhaps it's a question that you guys want to be mulling over in your heads as we get into it. But we're going to jump into the night now. And don't forget, we'll come back for question time. So keep on asking your questions for Seno. And Ryan, Seno and I will be having the chats later on at the end of the night. But I'm going to pass over to Jen now, who's actually in Griffith. So thanks very much for joining us, Jen, and she's going to be reading the Bible for us tonight, so Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 1 to 12. Thanks very much. There's no sound.
You muted, Jen. Let's start again. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 1 to 12. So I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. As it is with the good, so with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of people, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. For the living will know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have part in anything that happens under the sun. Go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy your life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labour under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the realm of the dead where you are going, there is neither working nor knowledge nor wisdom. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not with the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favour to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, and birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them.
I think I've found my family motto. A live dog is better than a dead lion. If that isn't a meme for the ages, I don't know what is. Of course, it reflects the key piece of wisdom coming from the teacher all through this brilliant reflection of life under the sun. It is always better to be alive than dead. But death comes to us all, the good, the bad and the ugly, and we don't know when it's coming. And today we come to the depressing endpoint of all these observations. We've looked at work and wisdom and family and politics and time and justice and pleasure. We've examined every aspect of living in this world under the sun. But tonight we come to the final reflection, the one that in a sense they've all been about, the one that rules them all, the one that binds them all to become meaningless, vanity, breath, chasing the wind. Tonight we come to death, the negation of all that is, the end of hope, the end of everything under the sun. And there are a few key pieces of wisdom that fill out the picture the teacher wants to paint for us. The first thing is, it doesn't matter how good or evil you are, it's all the same to death. So the teacher says in verse 2, all share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. As it is with the good, so it is with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. The two absolute certainties of life, death and taxes, right? The one thing we know for sure about every life born into this world under the sun is that it will die one day. There is no other outcome under the sun. You can be the absolute best person who ever lived. You can live humbly and serve the needy. You can do good to all, or you can be the absolute worst person. You can trample on the weak, exploit the poor, serve only yourself, cause untold destruction and horror. It doesn't matter, because either way, you're in the same boat. Verse 3, this is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes us all. And the worst thing, it's not just that we die and all hope is gone, but that we know we're going to die. The living know that they will die, says the teacher in verse 5. We can see it coming a long way off, and we know it's random. It could happen any time. And we know it doesn't matter how good you are. We know. We aren't like the animals. We're alive and we're aware of ourselves. We're aware of our place in the world. We know who and what we are. And the great piece of self-knowledge this gives us, we're going to die and we have no control over it. And that knowledge is enough to bring you to your knees with rage and frustration and despair, because honestly, what is the point? What's the point of striving for anything in this brief spurt of life under the sun? Because it gets worse. Not only do we all die, not only do we know it, but everything that we are dies with us. Take a look at verse 6. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. How awful is that? The end is the end. Percy Shelley wrote one of the great poems of all time called Ozymandias. It goes like this. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Now, I know we don't really like poetry much anymore, unless it's in a hip-hop song, but I couldn't resist because this poem picks up the sense of despair that all of our works will perish with us, and eventually we are unremembered, even the greatest of people. You can be a beggar on the streets, or you can be the biggest, brightest star of your era, but when you're dead, all that you are dies with you. Once you're dead, you cease having any impact on the living world. The world goes on without you. Sure, you may invent something or say something profound, but those things only survive because others pick them up and use them, not you. You're gone. And the final reflection on death. You don't know what's coming. The teacher says it in verse 1. He says, I reflected on all this, and I concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. When you confine yourself to this world, under the sun, there's no knowledge of anything beyond, of anything after. You don't know if there'll be something or nothing. And if there is something, you don't know what that something will be, because that would require knowledge that you can't find under the sun. And if you can't know the outcome, how can you find any purpose in what you do now, good or bad? There's no further reward, he says in verse 5. So what is the point? In fact, it's even worse than that, because as he says in verse 11, the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favour to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Time and chance. It's all just time and chance, with no clear outcome, no clear winner. No one knows when their time will come, just that it will. And this is the summary of the teacher's reflection on death under the sun. All of us die, and we all know it, and all we are dies with us, and we don't know when it's coming, and we don't know if there's anything more. Now, seeing that clearly is not nice, not pleasant. I can only imagine what was going through the teacher's mind as he wrote it. But it's true. It makes perfect sense of our experience of life under the sun. What do you do with this kind of knowledge? What do you make of it? Where does it lead you? Well, one way that we've gone in our world is nihilism. Nihilism is the negation of everything, even knowing itself. There are no real truths. There is no real morality. There is only the brute fact of our existence. As Shakespeare said in the play Macbeth, life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour on the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. You mean nothing. I mean nothing. It all means nothing. And all that exists is me and what I choose to do. And I don't need to ask what I should do or what is good to do. There is no should or good because there is no point. So I only need to know what I want to do. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche called this the will to power. It's why a lot of people today will interpret everything in terms of power structures, because naked existence and naked will are all that's left under the sun. Everything else has been burned away by harsh reality. That's one way we could go. And many people have gone that way, and we've seen the results. But what I find really interesting is that the teacher doesn't go that way. You can almost see him teetering on the edge of that abyss of despair, but he doesn't fall in. Instead, he opts for a different course. He says in verse 7, "Go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife whom you love all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labour under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead where you're going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom." It's a very different perspective, isn't it? For the teacher, this knowledge doesn't lead to despair. It doesn't lead to a naked exercise of will, a striving for power. Instead, he calls on us to embrace our lot in life. Not to despair or to grieve, but to love the life we have, to be glad and joyful, to work with all our might, and all the more since we know that we can't take it with us. Because it's good to be alive. A live dog is better than a dead lion, right? So the teacher's advice is, know who you are. Be aware of your end and use that as a spur to embrace life now, to live the best life you can live, to work hard, to love your friends and family well, to do good in the world, to live a life of joy. That's what he's describing. To live joyfully all the meaningless days of your life, all these fleeting, futile years. Now I've got to say, that's a vision I like a whole lot more than nihilistic despair or the will to power. To see life clearly and to embrace it, that appeals to me. I think it appeals to a lot of us. Not many of us want to spend our lives dressed all in black talking about power structures and the proletariat. We would rather just get on with things. And perhaps that's the perfect summary of what the teacher's saying. Just get on with it. Live your life well. So there are two visions of life, two ways you could respond to living with death under the sun. And most of us, I think, would agree with the teacher that his way is better, to embrace our brief and meaningless lives and to live them as best we can. But why is it better? Why is the teacher's vision a better way to live? If there truly is no way to know if one way is good and another way is evil, why should we choose this way, the teacher's way? And the answer is, well, there's no answer to this question under the sun. As much as the teacher's advice appeals to me, there is no reason under the sun that I can find to say why you should live this way, even though I think you should live this way. In fact, even though his answer appeals to me, the more rational part of me says that the nihilists make more sense. If there is no meaning, then there is no real good or evil. There is just me. So why do I want to live the teacher's way? Why do I want the teacher to be right? Why do we all want him to be right? Well, it's because we yearn for life beyond the sun. We yearn for God, for a creator who fills this life with meaning and joy, who fills our decisions with moral meaning, good or bad. And this is who the teacher believes in, and he can't escape it. And so his advice takes us beyond the sun. This is the heart of the Christian view of the world, that there is a God who made us and who says our lives are purposeful, that our good actions and our bad actions are just that, good or bad, that our love and our hate are morally important, and that how we live has consequences. This is why Christians have always invested in the life of the communities that they live in, why they've built schools and orphanages and nursing homes and hospitals and homeless shelters, why they've run soup kitchens and joined sporting teams and got involved in local politics, because life is to be lived and to be lived well. Because we believe there is a creator who loves us and who commands us to love others. What do you believe? Is there anything that takes you beyond the sun to see life this way? Anything that lifts you out of the nihilistic world of drab grey and into a life of vibrant colour, that gives your work and relationships a meaning beyond yourself, that leads to true joy? Well, leave a comment or ask a question. I would love to know.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, friends. We're going to pray together now. So if you'd like to join me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for sending your Son to earth to die for us. And thank you that it means that we have eternal life with you. Thank you for all the blessings we have living in Australia, including the national peace that we enjoy. We pray today for those people living in war-torn countries. We pray that the people in those places will be encouraged by your word. Help those sharing the good news of Jesus to share the message widely, and those who hear it will find comfort and peace. We pray that Christians in those places will be beacons so that people can share in the comfort you offer. For those suffering in these countries, we pray that they will remember you and stand firm in your love. Thank you that you offer us all peace, comfort, and joy in Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen.
Okay, thank you very much for praying for us, Laura. Before we get into question time, we're going to have a bit of a chat because Lockie actually made a comment as the talk was going on that all this death stuff is pretty heavy. And I think he's right. I think a lot of us come at this and we kind of just get hit with the weight, and it raises good questions for us, and it's helpful for us to sometimes process that. How did you kind of take that talk, Ryan? What stood out to you? What were some challenges or some encouragements?
Yeah, the reminder of, it's been a little while since I've reread Ecclesiastes, but that reminder of the meaninglessness of life, or the trying to find the flippancy of trying to find meaning under the sun, is so apparent when you actually do take a step back and look at it again. And so, things that I'm reflecting on right now is, how often I try and do that without even meaning to, where I try and create my own meaning. But in doing so, I think I realize that if I've created my meaning is quite literally made up. And so I'm making it up as I go along. And just reminding me that I have to, and as the teacher points out, my meaning has to be found somewhere outside of under the sun. Here. And personally, that forces me to reflect on God and how He gives me that purpose, I think. And so lots of those kinds of thoughts are entering my mind right now, and lots of questions are being asked because of it.
I found it really interesting, actually, like just kind of thinking about that, like we've got to look beyond the sun to find that answer. And Seno kind of talked about, and it reflected on what you were actually saying at the start about how do you embrace your life. Well, it comes about knowing who you are. And Seno literally said, know who you are, be aware of your end, and use that as a spur to really embrace life now, like to embrace your day. And so in some ways you need to know who you are. I think Seno touched on it quite well at the end. Well, we need to know our Creator, because our Creator is the one who actually gives us that purpose, like that call to love each other, that call to actually do stuff here and now, because we see that consequence at the end. It's quite challenging.
So I'm really curious if anyone wants to respond. I'd be really curious as to where people find their meaning, particularly if they're not Christian or if they don't believe in God. Like, what is it how do they get past this thought or this nihilistic idea, without falling into just, I do this because I feel like doing that. Because that doesn't suggest anything that you're meant to do, just I want to do that. So I'm really curious in regards to that.
Definitely, because I think there probably are a lot of people out there, and I know a lot of my friends who don't believe, and yet they're still waking up every day, and for some reason they have an understanding of who they are, and so they're living their life and they're embracing their life with that understanding. And so it would be quite interesting to have that chat with people to say, okay, well, actually, what's different between us? What are you finding that in? What are you finding that purpose in? Which is a challenging question.
Yes, and it's exciting and still blows my mind that this is a question that the Bible actually brings up. It's not afraid to talk about these ideas. They're not new. They haven't come up in the last 150 years with Nietzsche or Camus or whoever. It's thousands of years old, people, and it's questions that God has explicitly given to us to think about and has given us an answer to, which just blows my mind every time I think about it.
And that's every time we think about Ecclesiastes, we're asking that question. We're like, oh wow, let's look at how long ago this was written. Like, has people really changed that much? Because we're still asking the same questions today, and every time we go through a chapter, the questions for ourselves are so relevant. And it's helpful to either raise up those questions that we didn't know we have, or for us as Christians, for people who do believe, to actually always come back to these questions, because I think at the end of the day, they will help your convictions grow stronger. Like, we can't just escape from these questions, because people will ask them. And they're constantly asking them.
It's on the minds of lots of our friends, I imagine, and family.
Yeah, so we encourage those conversations. But speaking of questions, as always, we have question time now. And I've seen that there's a lot of questions coming through. So as always, we'll try to see how many we can get through. Now we're going to kind of jump over a little bit and we're going to flip around the screen a little bit. And Seno is actually going to join us from his room somewhere. We don't know. So I think hopefully he's up there now for you guys. Here we are. Say hi, Seno.
G'day. How you doing? I'm in a secret, undisclosed location for everyone's safety.
That's nice. Seno, how are you going not being here?
You know, it's been really strange watching the whole thing kind of via a Zoom link, and I've had the live stream up as well. It's been very strange, but I've learned a lot.
Have you been commenting against the other Andrew Seno? I really want to know who that fake Andrew Seno is. Is it you or is it who is the real?
I think there are a couple of fake Andrew Senets, Caitlin.
Schism in your psyche, it seems.
Mm.
So you're saying, Seno, if anyone receives a care reaction from you or a love heart reaction in their comments, that's the real Andrew Seno.
I don't heart nothing, Caitlin. I have no heart. I'm the big man.
Seno, we do have a question straight up, and it's from Michael, and he wants to know, where are you?
In a secret, undisclosed location. I can't say. I was meant to be in Canberra at a conference this week, and so I would have been tuning in from the Novotel in Canberra, but I got a cold on the weekend. So instead, I'm tuning in from my room upstairs. So I'm all of like 5 meters away.
But we're not going to see each other because we don't want any sickness coming this way.
That means the next question is, where are we? If we're 5 meters away from it.
Who knows? Maybe people can work out the location based on that answer. Okay, well, question time. Let's get into the questions then, Seno. Obviously, we'll see how we go. But we're going to start off with a big one from Tash, and it's kind of got two together. But she's asking about basically, is it too harsh when talking to people who don't believe to point them to the pointlessness of life, particularly their life without Jesus, because there is no purpose in going to work or existing without him. But is it actually our job to point it out? And if so, how do we actually do that lovingly? Or should we perhaps let them come to this conclusion on their own?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wonder if you guys have struggled with that same question as well. I know I have at times. And it's in some sense, it's all of the bad news that goes with the good news, isn't it? I mean, the Christian message is good news, but the good news comes with some hard news, some bad news. And so how do you deliver bad news to people? And I do think there is a time and a place for it. And so I do think the way to it is probably better in a conversation than in a monologue, if you know what I mean. So, Tash, I wouldn't necessarily sit my friend down and say your life is purposeless and empty. There is nothing there. So give up hope. But I do think those are questions people ask at different points in their life. I think people come up against it at different moments where they're struck by the emptiness of the lives that they're pursuing, of the meaninglessness of it all. Because I think what the teacher says resonates with people. I don't know if do you guys find that same thing to be true yourselves?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find that I've had similar conversations with people at work but I haven't brought up in a monologue. It's just been as we've exchanged our opinions and thoughts about life. Slowly we've come to that. I suppose the big theme that I have with my colleague is the subjectiveness of our thoughts and opinions, where that leaves us.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it really depends on relationship, because you're not just going to go up to some random who you know is not a Christian and just say to them, "Oh, your life is pointless." Like, that's just something that we wouldn't do. That's not loving, and that's what Tash is asking. What is loving? And I think relationship is loving. If you have a friend, they are going to ask these things. Like, you make known your faith and you talk about what you believe in and why you believe in that way. And I think out of relationship, and as you said, Sano, like stages in their life, they'll ask these questions. And if they know that you have an answer that you're quite confident in, like, they'll ask you, like, what is it? Peter talks about always be prepared to give an answer for the hope you have. That kind of suggests that people are going to ask questions then. Yeah.
And I think it's about asking those questions, isn't it? About what makes you feel like you have hope in this life. Like, what is it that makes you feel like you have hope, or what do you do when you feel a sense of despair that this whole life is meaningless or pointless or empty? Excuse me. But those things will come up, I think, in conversation, is my impression. Often it's not a bludgeon that we knock our mates over the head with, or even strangers. You know, you can have a conversation about ultimate things with someone you've not met before. That's just one of the peculiarities of the way we meet and talk with people. But I would always do it in the context of a conversation and asking different kinds of questions about where their sense of meaning comes from. Because in a sense, that's what we're trying to explore. We're trying to explore with people how they get beyond the sun. And a lot of people don't have much to get them there, to anchor them there. They have these vague ideas. They'll say, "Grandma's smiling down at me from heaven," and yet they won't believe in God. And so they've got this kind of, they're holding these different things here together, and they don't understand how anything fits. And so I think asking people questions is the best way to go.
So do you think, Sano, just on that, in part of Tash's question was, is it our job to point it out to them? So are you saying, in a sense, we do have a responsibility to help these people in these questions, to point them towards Jesus?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Caitlin. And I think I would say that God's put us, as Christian people, we believe God puts us in the world for a reason. God places us where we are in life for a reason. God puts us around the people we're with for a reason. And part of that is to love them and to love them well. And loving people well is actually helping them to understand their lives, helping them to think those things through. I don't think it helps anyone to be clueless about who they are and what they're for, even if they have very different ideas about that than you. And so I do think there's a bit of a responsibility there for us to gently, kindly, graciously ask the questions that help people to open up. And one of the things as human beings that we can do to help love other human beings is to get better at having conversations and asking those kinds of questions. Excuse the cough.
That's okay. You can cough all you want there. Okay, thanks for that. I hope that's helpful for you, Tash, and perhaps anyone else who actually has these kind of conversations with people or is wondering about how do they share what they're learning from Ecclesiastes with other people. We got a question from Stanley now. Is it an okay desire to wish to leave a legacy behind after we die, either just for our family or for the world in general?
Yes, I think that is, Stanley, a natural desire for people to have. I think in the poem Ozymandias, that great king wanted to leave a legacy behind, and that legacy was of his power that he thought was endless. It's not a wrong desire to have, to want to, leave a bequest to family or friends or to charity, to do something in the world that benefits people and helps make progress. Those things are good urges to have because we want to love people. I think the question that Ecclesiastes asks is there meaning in that, and where does that meaning come from? And I think what it wants to do is point us beyond the sun, as we've said. And so I think the reason we talk about these kind of things is because we, in our hearts, we actually believe there is something beyond the sun. We believe there is a God there who made this and who gives it meaning and purpose. And we may not want to say that out loud, but in our hearts, I think we want it to be true. That is, we long to live the kind of life that the teacher recommends. Yeah.
Do you think as well, I think, we think of, and you actually quoted a fair few people in your talk tonight, like you quoted Ozymandias, Shakespeare. These people have obviously left a legacy, like their words in some ways have lasted and we've given them that power to last. Is it right for us, in a sense, to continue people's legacy? Like you think of all the Christians that have done stuff and we talk about them, C.S. Lewis, there's all these people, Arthur Stace, like we talk about them constantly. Is that in some ways good, or is that unhelpful?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. I think it's part of being human is to build on previous generations. It's both natural and good to look to the past and to seek to learn from it and to build from it. Some of these people, Shakespeare was a prolific and profound English writer. His poems, his plays shaped the language we speak today. So many expressions we've got today come from Shakespeare. The other great influence, of course, is the translation of the Bible into English by Tyndale and Wycliffe and others, who shaped the modern English language. So, I think all of those things are really good. Even the people whose works dismay us, like Nietzsche and his kind of will to power and that idea of nihilism, that's actually really important to see, because he was completing thoughts. He was building on thoughts that had come before him and bringing them to their natural conclusion. And what he helped us to see is that when you start without God, you end up in bleak nothingness. And that's what Nietzsche helped us to do. He finished that project. And so as dark and as hard and as difficult to understand as a philosopher like Nietzsche was, he's really important. And so that sense of legacy, that sense of building on and learning from others, I think is really good. I'm not sure if you're aiming at something else there with your question, though, Caitlin.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, do you think there's an aspect in terms of what the teacher's getting at? There's a sense, at least in my experience, a lot of people try to leave a legacy as a way to, I think in their own brain, reach a sense of immortality. But obviously the with that poem is that never works.
No, it never works. And even with people who've profoundly influenced our world today, which Nietzsche has profoundly influenced us today, but also political figures like Churchill and others who've had a great influence, they're gone. And so we remember their names and what they did, but that doesn't make them immortal, because they take no further part. That is, they are gone. And unless you believe in something beyond the sun, they are fully gone. It doesn't matter how many of their words remember. It doesn't matter how profound their inventions were. They themselves take no further part. And I think that's the point the teacher's making. Not that their words will be forgotten necessarily. They may not be. The words may be remembered, but the person themselves is gone. They're not immortal. And we're reaching for it, I think. You're right. I think our desire to build a legacy is our desire for life beyond the sun. We really want the teacher to be right. We want the teacher's philosophy of life to be right. We want there to be life beyond the grave, despite the fact that we clamour against it. And so, I think all these longings for legacy are clamouring, are crying out, yearning for God.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Pushing us back to those questions to look beyond the sun, and exactly what the teacher is trying to do, and trying to show us that we need to ask these questions to find Jesus, to find the true purpose. And now we're going to jump outside of Ecclesiastes just for a little bit. A question from Evie has come in about John chapter 2 and about this scenario where Jesus changes water to wine. And
Yeah.
she's asking, why did Jesus turn water into wine? Did he do it
Mm.
to show people his power and glory? Or is there another reason? So could you help us out with that, Sano?
Yeah, Jesus' most popular miracle with university students, turning water into goon. It's a really interesting episode. Certainly the purpose of the episode itself in John chapter 2, John writes, is that Jesus revealed his glory by doing this. That is, he revealed a little bit of who he was. And people were drawn to him. They began to put their faith, their trust in him. And so that's the point of the miracle there. What was the second part of the question, Caitlin?
It was why did he do it? And was it to show his power and glory? So
I think it's to show his power and glory. I think why water to wine, why that particular miracle, I think it's partly to do with wine itself and the function of wine and what he was at. He was at a wedding celebration, and both wine and weddings and parties are big imagery in the Bible. The kingdom of God has been pictured as a celebration and a marriage feast in particular. And so all the way back to that one of the most famous of Psalms, the Lord is my shepherd, in Psalm 23, he talks about the Lord preparing a table for him in front of his enemies. He's, he's at a feast. And one of the enduring images that Jesus uses to talk about God's kingdom is a feast and a party, and in particular a wedding feast. And so I think that's a really important idea, but also this idea of wine being a symbol of blessing and of joy. And so in the Psalms in the Old Testament, it talks about God creating, what does it say? Wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to sustain his heart. And he talks there about the three different kind of food groups for God, if you like. Food for sustenance, bread to sustain his heart, food for health, oil to make his face shine, and food for joy, wine to gladden the heart of man. And so that image there of Jesus turning water into wine is an image of not just God's kingdom, but of the joy and blessing of God's kingdom, which is why he turns it into really good wine and not goon.
It's also really interesting because, well, definitely in John, it's his first miracle. Like, it's the first thing that he does, and he even says, it's not my time. And he says it to his mum. He's like, how are you making me do this, mum? So it's an interesting miracle even of itself. I don't know about the other Gospels, whether or not they actually, I don't know if the other ones have them. There you go. So it's an interesting one for John to have.
John's full of those interesting little episodes. I always recommend people read John. It's both the most simple and the most profound of the biographies of Jesus, the Gospels.
Yeah, very much. Now we have a whole lot more questions, so we might wrap up on this last one because obviously we still want to get through as much as we can within the hour, but obviously there's going to be a lot more for Thursday. So Andrew, Evie, Jen and Duncan, your questions will be answered on Thursday, hopefully. But we're going to wrap up with Lockie's question, actually. So he quotes Hebrews 9, verses 27, just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. His questions are, so he starts off, is man's purpose to be judged? And from a non-Christian perspective, would you say that man's purpose is just to die?
No, I don't think so, Lockie. Man's purpose is not to be judged. Man's endpoint is to be judged. Man's purpose is to live. And so the idea of judgment is an assessment of your life. Your purpose is to live a life in this world that God accepts, God finds acceptable. And so we are destined to be held accountable for that life. And so our purpose isn't judgment or death. Our purpose is life and how we live it. And one of the Christian gospel says that we fail to live the life that's acceptable because we've turned away from God. Our life has been filled with vanity and meaninglessness, with waste, with death, and with the great evils we fill the world with. And so the destiny of us all in the final wash up and assessment is to face judgment and fail that test, which is why he goes on to speak about what Christ has come to do. So just as man is destined to die once and after that to face judgment, so Christ will appear a second time, not to bring judgment, but to bring salvation to those who wait for him, I think is what it says. And so, yeah.
I was going to say, is that why, I guess, in a sense, I mean, it's hard though, because for Christians, our life don't end in judgment. Our life actually ends with the new creation, and it's
right.
eternal.
Yeah. And yet passing through that judgment is partly where all of us will go to that end point. And so, yeah. But our purpose is to live, which is why Christ comes to redeem us, to resurrect us, to raise us into a new life, a life lived the way God intended it to be lived. And so what does God desires for us? God desires for us joy and hope and fulfillment, not fulfillment of the empty dreams we have in this life here and now, but fulfillment of the life that he intended for us. Yeah. I feel like I'm wandering aimlessly now. But in terms of purpose is about life, not about death.
Yeah. Well, that's really helpful, Seno. We might wrap up question time there so that we don't go into another question and then go over time. But for all of those who still have questions, who have posted questions, we will get to them on Thursday. Seno will be back. We'll be back on the couch to answer these questions for you guys. But thanks again for joining us, Seno, even from, that whole time away and so far away from us right now. We appreciate you here answering our questions, and thank you, Ryan, for coming on and filling in Seno's spot there with the flagging. I just want to end for the people watching with that reminder about what you said, Seno. It's always better to be alive than dead, but still death comes to us. And that was a big lesson that we learned tonight. It's a lot to take in, and yes, it is heavy, but it is reality. So I want to ask that question for you guys watching. Well, what are you going to do with this knowledge? How will you live your life? How will you embrace your life? So take that away with you for this week and perhaps think about it. And then get ready and prepped for us to move into kind of the closing end of Ecclesiastes. So we've got 3 more weeks left, so we hope you can join us for all 3 of those weeks. But until next week, we will see you then. Bye.